Good morning, everybody. As you can see, I have a pile of lusciousness and pretty colors here on my table. I have 3 large journals, soft-cover journals with lacing card, vintage lacing cards on the covers, and they are all completed. One of them I am keeping. I wanted to keep one of these because I love them, and just to kind of give me a place of reference when I want to make something like this again. And this is the one I'm keeping. So I'm going to go through these 2, and I might show the other one in a separate video, but these are the 2 that are in my shop. So let's just get going into these. Let me just say that on the front of each one, on the front and the back, is a dangly trim. So if it's on the bottom of the book on the front, then it's on the top on the back. You see, this one is on the top here, so I have something on the bottom here. I want to go through this one first. I have it tied with a strip of a vintage pillowcase, and I used one that has yellow in it because there's a lot of yellow in that lacing card, and it is a vintage pillowcase, so there's a little bit of staining right there, which I think is quite lovely, and it is clean. It's not a dirty pillowcase. It's just got an age spot on it. So as I said, there is a vintage lacing card or a sewing card on the front of each journal, and I threaded a pretty blue yarn, kind of a chenille yarn, through the holes in this one. And I just added a bunch of embellishments, like vintage ribbon, embroidered ribbon, a little fabric ruffle there, cut out from a vintage wall calendar, a linen calendar, a circle there, fabric circle, this little Dolly Dingle figure that I cut out of a piece of fabric, and a piece of watermelon fabric because it's a fruit bowl here. This is vintage pom-pom trim. I used a beautiful vintage plaid in pastel colors that my mother had just cut. It wasn't hemmed or anything. She just cut it to use as a tablecloth when we were camping or going on picnics. And when they moved, I found it. And so I've been using it in some of my journals. And on the spine, that plaid fabric spreads out over the whole front and back cover. It's just one piece of fabric, which I then covered with a bunch of stuff. And on the spine is a piece of a decorator fabric, or sample fabric that was in a book, you know, like a decorator fabric book. And it has a parrot on it, and I like the colors. And then I added just a little piece of vintage patchwork right here. So there is a lot of color here. And then after I sewed the signatures in, I added this blue, a yellow rosette, large rosette. On the back, I added this piece of toile fabric with the girl on a swing, and this piece of thick felt, and another fabric circle, a ruffle, and this really fun fringe. There are 3 signatures in each of these journals. This one measures 7 1/4 by 9 1/2, and the spines are about 2 1/2 inches. I used more of the decorator fabric, like this parrot piece. They all came in the same book. I used 2 more pieces to cover the inside, and I let them overlap. I sewed, and there's I have a couple of videos showing how I put these covers together. So it shows how I sewed down this piece first, and then I put this piece on the back page and let it overlap here so that we have a little tuck spot. And I sewed right here so that putting this card in here, it won't slide down to underneath here. So this is looks like a vintage membership ticket, but it is it came out of a Somerset Studio magazine, one of their pages that they give you to cut up and use. There's a vintage book plate on here. Someone sent me a package of a variety of these kind of sticker book plates. It depicts Girl with a Broom by Rembrandt. And in this lace pocket, I included this Polaroid cut from a scrapbook paper cut apart sheet, and you can just add a nice photo there. And this also came from a Somerset magazine. It's an adorable little photo. And a little gift card that came with some wrapping paper. Some pretty cherries. It's from Current. The scrapbook paper that I used, I took cut off pieces from previous projects and sewed them together to make a larger page. And I also have a video about how I came up with large pages to fit into this oversized book. So that's what this is, a couple of pieces sewn together, and then I have attached on a hinge a really pretty pastel green CD envelope, and this is just a scrap of scrapbook paper that I cut to size and put in there. So you can put your own picture in there if you'd like. You can write on the back of that card, it's plain white, and I added this vintage ticket. This is a piece of stationery, and I just glued on a yellow envelope and added just a little collage here of fabric and an applique, and there's just a cutout shape in there that you can write on or put a picture on. Here we have a piece of brown file folder. It was actually part of an accordion file that I got at the thrift store, and on a lot of the pages and tags I just sewed remnants of fabric pieces just for fun. And there's another one of the little Dolly Dingle characters. This was a cloth book from 1939 that featured cloth dolls from around the world, and the face side was on the left of the page and the back side was on the right. So the face side we will see when we get to the back side of this signature. This is vintage wrapping paper. Computer paper with roses on it, and a little computer card, and a little fabric circle. And I did try out one of the pretty stitches on my new sewing machine, and I really like that. A budget book page. This was a tablet, but it's a large, like a planner page. And this is a vintage sticker. Says satisfaction guaranteed, and this is a vintage soft drink label. I got both of those pieces from the Boston Bag Lady on Etsy. This is a wallpaper border piece with Barnes on it, and a flashcard. This is from a children's book, or from a vintage book. I don't know if it was a children's book. I just cut it out and put it on a piece of cardstock. And I included quite a few of, well, several anyway, of my homemade ephemera pieces that I've had in my little homemade ephemera box. So I used some of those in these books. A little playing card with a Dresden plate piece, cotton fabric. And I used some of my green stamp books to make embellishments. I sewed it to a piece of cardstock to make it sturdy. And here we have a vintage flashcard with some fabric added. I just cut these little pieces from a vintage tablecloth and glued them on. There's a little fabric flip. And you'll see lots of fabric. I'm not going to keep talking about all the little fabric pieces that you'll see. Here we have a vintage bias trim label as a pocket, and I included a paint, what are they called? Paint chip. And this is one of my digitals of vintage book covers and illustrations. And this is something that was in a batch of fabric and things that I got from a flea market. Just a piece of cross stitch. I sewed it to cardstock. Here's the back of that doll, or the front. This is the front of the doll. And this is a pleated paper ruffle that somebody sent me. She sent me a long strip, and I just cut pieces off it to put into these journals. I also received this image in a Happy Mail. I think it was for decoupage, but I glued it to some cardstock and made a big pocket out of it. And inside we have some long tags. This is from a paper doll book, vintage paper doll book, a row of houses, and a couple of flashcards. This is the second signature. There's an atlas page, a vintage mailing label, vintage tickets over here, and a really pretty watercolor print. This is one of the souvenir flyers that you can pick up when you travel, and this is the Endless Mountains of northeastern Pennsylvania. This map, it says Tioga Point here. That's where Athens is in Tioga Point. Well, yeah, Tioga Point, I'm not going to go into it all, but that's a local area. But I live in this area, and I grew up here in East Smithfield. So I am very familiar with all of this area around here, of course. My brother lives in Troy. Here we have Elmira, New York. See, this is New York border. That's how close I am to New York. And my sister lives in Elmira. There's some ledger paper, a vintage recipe book page, and a little vellum envelope I just glued on here. I didn't put anything in it, but there's a little slot there to put the flap in. Some wallpaper, and a really pretty playing card, and some vintage pom-pom trim, and a florist tag, and you can open that up and you can do mixed media on there or write on it or glue stuff. Children's book page with a vintage price card that came also from the Boston Bag Lady. This is a craft book about painting, I believe. It was one of the pattern sheets that was in the center of the book, and it was very, very big. Another children's book. Look at that funky card. Somebody sent that to me in a Happy Mail. Here's the rest of the Endless Mountains. I was looking for Tioga. This is Tioga Junction here. My other sister lives in Tioga. Right there it is. She's the furthest away from me. It's about an hour. Here's a little note card with a recipe on it. Oh, it's not a recipe, it's equivalent measurements. And I sewed it on. You can open it up and write on it and then tuck this tag. This is one of my handmade tags with Mod Podge napkin and a bunch of other stuff. I sewed this piece of button trim to the bottom of the page there, and I love the way it hangs out the bottom. Oops, we lost this. I'll have to find where that goes. Another note card sewn on with some flashcards. 3 fabric circles sewn onto this vellum architect paper or engineer's paper. It's got a grid on it. This was from a vintage book about making dolls, and it's got patterns for the doll clothes. We had the cover of the green stamp book. This is a page from the green stamp book, and I again sewed it to cardstock. And there's a vintage ticket. This was glued onto the page, and I added some vintage rickrack. It's a flash card, and this is one of my handmade ephemera pieces. I have a video of making these. It's just a tag that I decorated and added a couple for writing on and put a ball chain on it. And this is from a vintage photo album, and it had a hole where it was bound into the book, and I just added a fabric strip through that. There's a little Mickey Mouse card. I added a paper doll outfit to that page. We have a pocket here with a recipe card, a flash card, and this is a stamp that I have. I just stamped it onto some green paper. a piece of stationery. It's a fold-a-note and a vintage envelope with a applique and a couple of cards in there. I sewed a piece of the selvage from a Tim Holtz fabric here with that pretty scallop stitch. There's a fabric flip and a little bridge tally card. This is a vintage flashcard type of thing that I put on a fabric hinge, and you can write underneath it. Here's another little playing card, and I just stuck a strip of green stamps in there so you can take them out and decorate with them, make embellishments. This is a piece of this fabric sample, and this is a vintage plant card that I collaged on and added a journaling spot on the back. And this is a little tag of craft paper. On the back we have that blue lace that just went across the whole back, and I added a flash card. There's a library card, catalog card with my signature on it. And then I took a vintage photo of a house and just sewed it to a scrap paper. Added a little piece of fabric. So that is a really fun journal with lots of room for you to play in this book. This is the fruit basket. Here we have a little girl. I used a pale blue pillowcase strip to tie this one closed. This is a lovely lacing card, and it is torn a little bit right here where whatever the original yarn was must have been pulled on it and it tore it. But it is glued down and sewn down to the cover, which is a black and cream toile fabric. That's what the base fabric is. Now I lost that. So in addition to the lacing card, and I used this multicolor shiny trim to go through the laces on her little dress, I added the vintage pom-pom, a little strip of fabric, embroidered ribbon, some pretty colored rickrack, and some fabric pieces. The back of it is covered with a piece of vintage, or the spine I mean, vintage patchwork, and a little piece of the tablecloth, that pastel tablecloth wraps around here, and the yellow rosette, and a little ruffle, piece of that calendar, and a piece of the felted wool, and just some various trims. I love this soft swingy fringe. It has the same measurements as the other one. There's a book plate, and I didn't tuck anything in there. I'm not sure where this fell from, but I'm going to put that in there. This is a booklet I made a long time ago. This is graphic 45 paper, and it looked like a photograph album, so I made a little booklet out of it, and I've never done anything with it. So I put that in there, and this is a tag someone made for me, and it says, "And the story begins." There's another CD envelope here, and this one just has a piece of that brown file folder, vintage file folder in there. A fold-a-note with an envelope on it, a little piece of fabric, and a little note inside. Here's a Dolly Dingle, and here is the doll page in this book. This is scrapbook paper, wallpaper border, little piece of tablecloth, the green stamp book, I love this selvage with the high heels on it. This is a doll from Sweden. More of that paper doll book. And a paper doll dress. This one is Natural Stone Bridge and Caves in the Adirondacks. Those are vintage flyers, by the way. I don't know if I said that. I just sewed a little piece of that fabric here with a card I made out of a vintage magazine ad. This paper tab of the recipe page was very damaged, and so I just glued this tiny, tiny little playing card there. Added a vintage label. Put a fabric cluster on this. A little children's playing card of George the Giraffe. A collaged tag that I made out of graphic 45 paper. This came from a baby's sheet or something. Vintage. More of the button trim. Here is a beautiful vintage happy birthday card, and I tucked a flash card in there and a little old photograph. I left the little pieces that attached it to the photo album. Again, one of the tags on the ring, or this one had a ring, the other one had a ball chain. It's got several tags on it. Paper doll dress, and this is a vintage eye chart from a doctor's office. I got a box full of optometry supplies at the flea market last year. That was a really fun find. By the way, I was supposed to go to Lewisburg to the antique mall with my friend yesterday. I told you I was going to. This is a strip of an old tablecloth, and I used that scallop stitch on it. We were supposed to do that yesterday, but it was raining all day, and I didn't want to drive in the rain. I had to drive to meet her before we took off, and it rained all day. And she said it was foggy down there, so we didn't go. There's some yellow stamps in this one. And here we have my signature. Look at this pretty green lace. It's a sheer lace with the green embroidery, and it's vintage. I didn't point that out at the beginning. Somebody sent me some of these. I'm sure somebody sent these to me. So it's just a suggestion card. And here is a photograph of spider web. Looks like it's on a swing set. There's just a chain. Isn't that a pretty photograph? And I just added this piece of vintage lace. So I'm going to call this one Sweet Girl, and this one is Fruit Basket Lace and Card Journals. I will come back in another video to show you my journal if you're interested in seeing it. I would show it to you now, but my battery light has been flashing and I don't want it to cut off on me, so I'll come back and do that in a separate video. I thank you for watching. I hope that you have watched some of the process videos, because I did several. I did quite a few videos for this series. So I hope that you were able to catch some of those. I'm pulling off the threads from these ties. And I hope that you really like these eclectic journals, because I really love making them. They are so much fun to make. I say that every time I make an eclectic journal, how much I love doing them. And you guys seem to like them too. So these are in my shop right now. So I have linked the shop below, so you can just click on that link and it'll take you to my Etsy shop where you can purchase these journals. And if they're not there, it's because somebody got to them before you did. And I want to say thank you to whoever goes and purchases these journals. Have a creative day today, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.